Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self and will be your host today. As always, I'm grateful for your time and attention. I'm certain that you will not regret it after listening to our next guest, Van Fletcher. For those that know Van, he is a legend and a force of nature. That part is obvious. But what isn't so obvious, at least not when you first meet him, is the suffering that he has endured. But trust me, he did not waste his suffering. In fact, I think it is part of his superpowers. You're in for a real treat today, so let's get started. All right, Van Fletcher, here we are.
Here we are.
I appreciate you coming in. We've been chit-chatting for a little while, and actually almost an hour since you've been here without recording. And as you know, this is my effort at a podcast on adventure, and where we find ourselves pushing to the limits of what we thought was possible and what we find. So I've known you for a long time, way back to college days, and the things that I've watched you do from afar at this point for the last 20 years is pretty amazing. So I want to get into some of that. And the question that came to my mind as I was thinking about this is, what is the first memory that you have of doing something really, really hard?
So I'm thinking more in terms of an event or an experience than I am maybe a season of life. So I would say doing Outward Bound. I was 18, and it was a 25-day, multi-faceted adventure in Utah. And you had elevation. I mean, we were, I think, at 7,000 feet. And I grew up with it was a fairly easy life, right? Roadblocks were cleared. My parents were great. And so when I had this opportunity to do Outward Bound before going to the UNC, and it was challenging, not just physically, but emotionally.
Was it one of those Outward Bounds where it's a group, but you kind of go out on your own for that amount of time?
You stay together as a group for the most part, but when you're with a group, you have no idea who is showing up to be in your group for 25 days. And there are people from all walks of life. And there were some people who were struggling personally, coming off drug addiction, trying to lose weight, athletic and completely out of shape. And so you end up sort of playing to the lowest common denominator of the group, but we had certain goals that we had to meet. And I mean, the stories that I could tell you are, yeah.
Had you had any outdoor experience at that point?
Just casual camping with friends and hikes and things like that, but nothing of that magnitude. Yeah.
What was the most challenging part of it?
I would say the daily experience. We had one gal on the trip who was uncoordinated, out of shape, complained, and we had to wait for her. Like, she was holding the group up as we tried to make certain, we'd we need to go 8 miles in a certain day or 20 miles or whatever to get to our next destination. And we would have to wait on her. She would fall into every creek. She was afraid to go to the bathroom in the woods, so she would just go on herself, and then we would it was not the most pleasant odor. So you can imagine, I mean, you can talk about it now and it sounds sort of funny but at the time it was so infuriating. You had compassion on her, and yet you kept thinking, I so wish you were not on this Outward Bound trip.
That's a nice way to put it.
I wish you were not. And we worried about her safety because we'd throw a rope across the canyon and go across it, right? Holding the rope with a carabiner. And
yeah.
We scrambled up mountains and crossed rivers where we had to, get completely wet up to our necks. And there were just multiple occasions where we really wondered if she was going to fall or get washed away or something like that. And I was 18, so I didn't look with her probably with as much compassion as I would at 47.
So 25 days.
Yeah.
And was there a broader goal that you guys were trying to complete, or was it just point to point, get there and stay alive?
It was point to point, but there was a good bit of hiking. We did a time on the river for a while. I remember walking through the desert. Utah's topography it's pretty dry. But we went through a desert where I went an entire day without drinking any water. And then we got to a river where we had to put iodine in the water, and the river tasted like horse manure because it was...
Probably was.
Yeah. And we had to drink it anyway, and I was so thirsty. I mean, it was everything from getting swarmed by mosquitoes to the point that you could literally just, if you clapped your hand, your entire hand would be bloody. Yeah. To, we had to do 48 hours solo in the woods, and flies found me. and we didn't have much food, and you had to ration your own food and stay by yourself out in the woods. And, I mean, there's just, I guess the trip was really meant to expose you to places where you were challenged, right? And some of it wasn't too bad. Paddling down the river in a little boat on Class 3 rapids, okay, it was, but I'm a swimmer, so I wasn't really worried about falling in the water. Versus spending time by myself for 48 hours. I don't think I'd ever done that.
Are you talking out loud to yourself by the end of that?
It looked a little bit, what's the Tom Hanks movie where he talked to Wilson?
Wilson.
Yeah. It was a little bit like that.
Have you done anything like that since then?
Not in that genre. I've tackled maybe a couple other things more recently. Yeah. Once I graduated from college and started work and married and kids and things like that. Yeah, I tabled some of that. That brought its own challenges. Sleeplessness. I mean, does that count?
That's a hurdle to overcome.
Yeah. I'll give you one quick story. The people listening wouldn't know this, but I swim. I've been swimming year round since I was 7, so 40 years. And when COVID and the pandemic hit and it sort of shut down pools, I made the decision, this of course is March, made the decision to start swimming in our local lakes, open water. And at the time, the water was in the 60s, and was training with 2 of my good friends, Ashley Wall, who ended up going to the Olympics for open water. But she was training for the Olympics, and they didn't know if it was going to happen or yet. We were so unsure, but we and her husband and one other guy went out, and we would swim open water for a long time. And I decided I'm going to swim around Charleston. And they held the race in October, and it was 12 miles straight. Can't hold on to anything. Can't touch you have a guide in a kayak to make sure you don't drown, but
Can't touch the kayak.
Can't hold on. And
how long did that take you?
4.5 hours.
So when you get to those kinds of physical extremes, are you hallucinating? Are you seeing blurry vision, or what's happening?
I would say if I backed up a couple years to when I started doing more endurance races and endurance challenges, I would say that sort of thing might happen. It didn't in this race. You do go sort of numb, brain, body. You want to talk about getting prune fingers, how when you're in the water
4 hours.
Oh boy, it's salty. You get stung by jellyfish, right? I had no wetsuit. It was just cap, goggles, and a Speedo. So I describe this as anything you do for any kind of long period of time, there is always, you have the dark night of the soul. You go through this period where you question yourself and everything, and you think about what it would look like to quit and how could I do it, and
that's coming.
You know it's coming.
And you still do it anyway.
You still do it anyway. And you still find a way to push through it because it's real. I mean, it's interesting how when you talk about it and you're not in the midst of it, it's sort of easy to talk about.
Absolutely.
But when you're in the midst of it,
No.
it is a fight.
Yeah.
It's like it feels like it's multiple times a minute.
How far were you into that swim before that happened?
I remember I was about 7 miles in. So, I mean, it's a beautiful swim. You're swimming around the historic part, and then you get out into some choppier water, and it is, I have a picture I should show you sometime, and my kayaker took it, and there's nobody around. There's no sign of civilization. The water's choppy. It's moving towards you. So that you're
swimming against the current?
Against the current.
Oh my God.
And they warned us that there was a stretch in there where that might happen. But Josh, I remember hitting it and thinking, oh, I'm just barely halfway through. And it kind of plays to what I've observed about races, which is about the 3/4 of the way through, somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 is usually the hardest part of the race, right? The finish, when you know it's getting close, there's a motivation that stirs. And getting to the halfway point is usually not that hard, but man, that stretch, and it was, and the conditions only exacerbated that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the things going on in your head, is it like different voices where you're trying to quiet the loud ones that are telling you the dark things? Do you have a go-to mantra, or do you have a go-to?
You read my mind.
Okay.
Yeah. So I came up with one. This is something that I had never really embraced until somebody I was talking to, an athlete, said they would tell themselves certain things. So I started doing that, and it really helped. So here's my mantra. I'll just say it. It's, I'm strong, I'm tough, and I never give up. It kind of rolls off. I'm strong, I'm tough, I never give up.
And you keep saying it until it becomes true.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
That's one of those things that's so interesting to me, that we have these default modes in our brain, and they're purely protective. Those voices are telling you to stop because you're doing something really hard and dangerous.
You're really tired.
Yeah. So did it happen in this race, or has it happened in any other race where you pulled the mantra out, you said the things that worked in the past, but they still didn't work? It's
happened in training.
Okay.
So quick background. I decided in 2000, at the end of 2017, Sarah my youngest was 7, and we were kind of out of the weeds in terms of just that relentless pace of parenting when
Survival.
your kids are right. Your kids are starting to get more self. And I remember it had kind of been bubbling up that I thought, I want to push myself into new areas of discomfort. Not in a sadistic, masochistic way, just more like I'm ready to challenge myself.
Yeah.
And
see what you find.
Because I've been doing my work for 12, 13 years. And so there was just this hunger. Early on in my training for triathlon, I would have workouts where physically I was in pain, but mentally I couldn't push through it. And it was ultimately a mental.
Yeah.
I haven't had a race. I have had races where I feel like my discouragement or my darkness may have won. I kept going, but it probably diminished my performance, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Have you had any races where you didn't finish?
Yeah. Last year.
Was it
It was an injury.
It was an injury?
Mm-hmm. I was having a phenomenal race I was doing a triathlon in Daytona a lot of it was in the racetrack area.
Oh, really?
And I was on the run. I was 4 miles in. I was moving. I was just having a great race. And then I just felt something pull. I kept trying to go, and about a mile, and that was the first race where I was DNF. That was...
What'd you pull?
A top kind of high hamstring.
Oh, man, that's hard to...
Yeah, I couldn't. And it took me 2 months to recover from.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And it was just an overuse injury? I think
it was.
You didn't step funny, or...
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. It had been nagging at me a little bit. And then when you race, it's amazing how the body just has this new gear. Right? Or a gear that you don't really get to tap into much when you're training. And I think when I turned it into that gear, it just said, okay, I'm done.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about your races, and I think we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But let's rewind a little bit and give a little context to how you got here. Again, you and I met in college. We were just a couple of goofballs trying to get a degree. Kind of went in separate paths as we left, but you graduated in 99?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Accelerated 5-year track.
Accelerated 5 years. That's a beautiful thing. So I was still there until 2000, and some of these details are a little fuzzy for me. So you're gonna have to fill this in. But you graduated, you went to work, and it's at some point you had a very serious brain aneurysm.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And then you obviously survived.
I did.
Thankfully, we're here talking to each other. Take me through that a little bit and give us some context of how Van surviving a brain aneurysm gets to become Van racing in world-class triathlon events today.
Okay. I'll try to do this concisely, Josh. So,
all right.
Went to work for IBM in sales right out of school. And my wife and I were dating at the time. We ended up getting married in 2000. But I'd only been working at IBM for about a year, and I was in Richmond at the time. Anne was overseas. And on April 27th, 2000, I was at the gym in the morning and was resting between sets. I'm trying to kind of allay any fears that people have here. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm saying this. So I was not lifting heavy weight, and then something popped. I was actually resting and felt something pop in my brain. And without going into a lot of details, it is actually called a ruptured AVM, which is an arteriovenous malformation. So an aneurysm is a vein, and this was my artery. It burst. I immediately felt it, started feeling weird, and passed out. I got back to my apartment across the street from where I was working out, and within 10 minutes had completely passed out. The ambulance got to me in time, intubated me.
Did you call the ambulance?
I called 911. I couldn't see. I'd lost my vision because it was in my occipital lobe. So by that point, my head was hurting unlike anything I've ever felt to this day. And I've had some painful injuries.
Yeah.
So they did brain surgery and fixed it. And then I woke up 4 days later. I was in an induced coma to make sure that because the brain can swell like that and you're dead. Woke up blind. couldn't see. And the recovery was not linear. It was quick in one sense. I started to get some of my vision back, but I would say for the next 4 months, I was legally blind. I couldn't read. I couldn't drive. I couldn't do anything.
Golly.
So during that time, the other thing that came out of that, in addition to, so I got my vision back, because you can tell I'm racing and driving and reading and things like that. But I also, my body, and this happens with TBI, traumatic brain injuries, and any kind of major trauma, sometimes the body's ability to remember how to sleep is lost.
Okay.
And I turned into this weird insomniac. I would sleep some during the day and then be up in the middle of the night. It was as if I had my body had lost its ability to understand how to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And Josh, I gotta be honest, the next 5 years I don't remember much. I mean, I remember things, but I dealt with severe insomnia for about 5 or 6 years. Severe. And, as I was mentioning to you a minute ago, that was actually the hardest thing I've ever done, was getting out of bed with 2 hours of sleep, night after night after night after night, and functioning. And I mean, I really did lose hope. I didn't think I was ever going to be productive as a human being. I worried about having kids. There were so many things I worried about. And, you still have to get through the day. I worked. I was in grad school.
I mean, that had to have been like a cascade effect of negative emotions.
It was awful. It was absolutely awful.
So what turned it around? What did you have to do to
I went and saw a neuropsychiatrist at University of Pennsylvania, and he specialized in what I was dealing with.
Okay.
Looking back, the missing piece in all of it was recognizing and understanding that what I had experienced would create what I'll call some psychological, like my brain was tired. Mm-hmm. I didn't give myself an IBM, who I was working for at the time, was phenomenal. I still to this day will say I love that company. It was like having a fire on an aircraft carrier, right? They kept sailing. They allowed me to, I still got paid while I was recuperating, but I should have had longer.
Yeah.
So it would have been helpful to have been talking with who specializes in traumatic brain injury, psychiatry, psychologists during that time, and I didn't until 2006, 5-6. But we got it under control. Some medication, some change in behavior. Mm-hmm. I retaught myself how to sleep. And by 2008, when I got into real estate, it was a ton better.
Okay.
But it took 2 years. It's funny though, when you go through what I'll call, so I'm doing now chosen suffering.
Yeah.
But that was something that I would not have chosen. So one thing that I think is hard about doing endurance races is you're ultimately choosing to do them.
Right.
Right. So the temptation to give up is a little stronger in one sense, because you're like, well, if I give up, I just give up. And
I don't have to be out here.
I don't have to be out here. Nobody's paying me to do this. Yeah. But when it's something in life that you have to endure and push through, that to me that's where courage really happens, is just absolutely just showing up and getting through the day.
Yeah.
And
was it just that simple for those 2 years? Was it more than 2 years?
It was about, so I had severe insomnia from 2005, 6. Okay. And then it was about 2 years to retrain.
Okay.
And it was through the help of medication. And
so for 6 or 7 years, not getting a normal night of restorative sleep, was it just as simple as I'm just going to keep going?
Yeah. I got no choice. I struggled with, there were times that I just thought being dead would be so much better.
Yeah.
Because
totally get that.
You guys know, I use this joke when I talk to, now that I'm on the other side of having little kids, when parents ask them, I usually always ask people, are you getting any rest? Mm-hmm. Right. And one of my jokes is, there's a reason why withholding sleep from people is like the number one torture technique. Right.
It absolutely
It'll break you down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I developed a mental fortitude, emotional fortitude, without wanting to or asking for it.
Yeah.
It just came, and it came through daily grit, grind.
Yeah. One of my, I'm going to say this and it's going to be like totally obvious, so it's not some profound observation, but one of the things that has hit me recently is that none of us escape suffering. The human condition, it finds us eventually.
Yes.
Eventually.
Yes.
So the question is not whether we avoid it or not. The question is always, what do we do with it?
What did we do with it?
And did I waste the suffering? Or did I learn from it? And so we all go through it. I'm curious, other than grit and resilience and pushing through, what did you learn? You didn't waste the suffering. So what was it that you learned from that?
These are things that I'm really able to see looking back more than I could in the moment. Yeah. So I'm going to say that with hopefully as much humility as you guys can, you can really appreciate, right? Because I think I learned, well, there were a couple things. One thing that I kept telling myself, this is probably the one thing I would tell myself is so there's a temptation when you're in the midst of suffering to feel sorry for yourself. And I think those are people who waste their suffering. Yeah. Is you start, and it comes down to what you believe, right? If you believe that you're being punished by God, or if you believe that you've got a bad lot in life and you focus inward, that will crush you. Yeah. And I chose not to do that. That doesn't mean that I didn't have moments where I'm like, this is absolutely, but I realized the importance of just getting up and doing the next thing, right? So that's kind of just do the next thing. And Anne would say that all the time, but it is vital. It to me is the essence of anything that requires endurance, right? Pushing yourself is just continue to do the next thing. So when I'm racing in triathlon now and I'm in that dark spell, it's just run the next minute. Yeah. And then when you get to the end of that minute, you run the next minute. So that's like the building block in my opinion. And to your point, not wasting suffering is the other thing I learned about it is you can actually do it. I know that sounds painfully Captain Obvious, but
no, what I hear in that is, what is the word? It's agency. This thing happened and I can't change that and it sucks. And I can either wallow in it passively or I can do something about it. Yeah. And that is the only way you learn that is through suffering.
That's it.
And so does that then translate into what you do with your endurance races?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you think you could have done what you're doing with triathlon and long distance swimming without that event happening 20 years ago? So
I do, but not with the speed. I think I had a leg up. That's why when I started doing triathlon, I was a newcomer. I would run 3 miles a week or 3 miles twice a week and never biked. It was just swimming. I think it allowed me to be successful in triathlon faster than most people. I do think I would have gotten there, but I think and I'm gonna slip in, Josh, sort of the thought I've been having about my life, because the ruptured brain artery, Anne had cancer in 2015, which was really hard on our family, but we survived that. When you look back on your life, or you look back on things that have been really challenging, you realize they become building blocks for the next challenge. But it's building blocks not in this glamorous, I learned so much and I'm ready for the next challenge. It's more that you just know how to push through. Yeah. Right. And so, I think that way about pain as well. A lot of people are like, because I have a very, very, very high pain tolerance, but to be fair, I do think some of us have higher pain tolerance than others. There's no question. Yeah, but it's also something that's learned and built and can be grown. So my pain tolerance now compared to what it was like, for example, pre-ruptured brain artery, they're worlds apart. Yeah. I can literally go to the doctor and he can pull out a huge needle and I'll watch him put it in, but I'm not doing it because I'm like, look at me, doc. It's more just, I've been stuck with needles 100 times. Yeah. So there's no substitute sometimes for just going through it. I guess is what I'm getting at. Yeah. Yeah.
So, we all have this ceiling or threshold of or what the pain limits are. And you absolutely can train that ceiling to raise, but it's incremental. It's not jumping into the pool.
No, it's not. It's not.
So your brain aneurysm was part of that. The sleeplessness was part of that. And so I want to ask you next about, you've had 2 different bike accidents that have been pretty severe.
Severe, yeah.
You probably were using those building blocks from what you learned through your early suffering to get through those experiences as well.
No question.
Tell me a little bit about what happened there.
Okay, well, I'm going to add a couple more.
Okay.
There were 2 big ones, and there were 2 what I'll call more minor ones. At the end of 2017, I had not raced, but I was starting to just bike and things. I actually had pulled up to a stoplight riding on my triathlon bike and flipped over and broke this collarbone. But it wasn't, I'm sorry, this one. But it wasn't severe, right? But that was sort of the first, oh, okay. Yeah. But, I mean, it hurt. You know, I went and saw the doc and he said, you're just going to have to suffer through it. Okay, deal. So fast forward, 2018 was relatively uneventful, and so was 2019. In 2020, so we were in the pandemic, and it was April 2020, and I was hopeful, like a lot of us, that things were going to return to normal faster than they did. And there was all the races have been canceled for the next several months, so I started training for a full Ironman, 2020. And I was at the end of a 120-mile bike ride. I was about 100 miles out in Chapel Hill, and I was by myself, and I just flipped over I hit something on the road. I flipped over my handlebars and broke my femur. And it was, and I
by
knew
yourself.
Yeah. And I didn't think by myself. I was on the side of the road. I could not move. I could not get myself out of the road.
How did you get help?
Apple Watch. I had one AirPod in my right ear, and because the left ear is always car side, right? So I had it in my right ear, and I just looked at my watch and I just hit 911. And
Apple, if you're listening, the royalty checks can be sent to Dan's home address.
I'm telling you, that technology is brilliant. Yeah. And they said, where are you? And I said, I have no idea. I'm on some road somewhere in sort of Chapel Hill, Durham, Cary. I can't remember. I was in pain. And they found me. They got to me. And a stranger stopped, and he blocked cars because I was really worried somebody's going to be texting on going 55 and would just run me over. My bike was in the road. I was in the road. It was...
And you couldn't get out.
Nope. Could not move. Way too much pain. I thought I'd just dislocated my hip, and then I went to the UNC hospital, and it was a broken femur. So they did surgery. They put 2 rods in, titanium.
They make you a little bit taller while they were at it?
They might have. I have not shrunk yet.
Yeah.
So that was intensely. I mean, that was the most painful injury aside from the rotator brain artery it was off the hook.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about that injury, back to kind of wrapping this into the context of our conversation, is the purpose of putting the titanium rods in is so that you will walk immediately.
Yeah.
And I couldn't walk. I mean, I remember day 3, I was in there, and then they got me up to walk, and I couldn't even walk. I could not
because
walk.
Of the pain, or just physically you couldn't make your body do it?
I could, well, so if they're going to insert titanium rods into your leg, they've got to cut through muscle, tendons, whatever else is in there. Yeah. They have to cut through all that, so it disconnects them. And so between the pain and I was on some heavy narcotics, but between the pain and just all the stuff they cut, I just couldn't move my legs. Well, I could move my right leg, but not my left leg. So their goal every day was to get me to where I could actually, with a walker, take a couple steps. The goal was so that I could take steps to get to the bathroom so I could go home. So I was there a week.
What year was this?
2000.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Wow, my God, 2020. 2020. My gosh. Yeah, 2020, April 2020. Wow. Yeah. And being in the hospital, and there are plenty of people who, if they listen to this, have been in the hospital during the pandemic. It was
a weird experience.
Oh, so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're craving human touch and reassurance, and all you can see are people's eyes and the mask, and they don't spend any time with you. And so rebuilding so first of all, there went my Ironman dreams for that year. But the race I was going to do was it was still on the books. So rehabbing that, it took me, I couldn't run for 3 months. And then I ended up getting back in shape and raced UNC Wilmington, half Ironman in October. And
October of 2020?
Yeah.
Same year.
Same year.
Man.
Yeah. And then I went and raced down in Daytona. And
that was
when I pulled my,
okay.
Yeah. I pulled my hamstring, didn't finish the race. Okay. So I kept training, was slated to do another race. I ultimately was going to World Championships in Utah this past year. I'm sorry, hang on. Let me go back. 2021, no races, right? Am I right about that? Okay. Josh, let me step back again. We're in 2022. I broke my femur last year, 2021. Yeah.
Beginning of 2021.
In April 2021.
Okay.
I was trying to figure out why I was. Then I raced in October last year. Then I raced in Daytona, which is where I pulled. So then I got back on the horse, rehabbed, raced in Texas, did really well, half Ironman. And then I was doing a full in May this year.
Where at?
Utah.
Okay.
St. George. It was going to be my first full Ironman. Now, keep in mind, I've been training for this for, ultimately it was a 2-year. And I flipped over my bike and broke my collarbone the day before the race.
Not even during the race.
I was there. I was there at transition off where the lake was, riding my bike, and I flipped over and broke it and flew back. Stayed to watch the race because I figured, it was a weekend and nobody's going to be able to do surgery on me. So stayed and then had surgery when I got back. And then...
How disappointing was that?
That was soul crushing.
Yeah.
I cried. I didn't cry from the femur, but I cried on this one, but it wasn't because of the pain, even though it was pretty good.
Just the loss.
It was a loss. Yeah. Because I was in tip-top shape. So started training again. Couldn't swim for a while. Couldn't run because of the jolt. So I'd bike, and I called myself a T-Rex because I would bike on my trainer inside, and you guys can picture a T-Rex. And so I'm pedaling, but my arms are doing this because I had a sling.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to race in a month, and then I'm going to do a full in November, my first full.
Where at?
Arizona.
That's supposed to be a good one.
It's a good one.
Buddy that's done that.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm back in shape. There's a little. I'll give you guys a little nugget. I found, and Rowdy Gaines believes this too. You guys know Rowdy from swimming. Yeah. He says for every month or for every day you're out of the water, you need a half day of training to get back. So if you're out of the water 6 months, it's going to take you 3 months to get back in full gear. And that's about right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what all this says, though, is you've got a history of going back at it.
Absolutely.
Is that intentional, or do you feel like that's in your DNA?
It's in my DNA, but there's an intentionality to it.
Okay.
Especially this last one.
Yeah. That's so easy. You could have just said, I'm done.
Well, I was close. Well, I would have found something else, right? Sort of like the swim around Charleston 2020. But that was the only, that was the race I did 2020 when I couldn't do anything else. I would have done something like that. But I talked to a sports psychologist here several times, and she and I, after talking, she said, this is who you are, right? You can't, this isn't time to give up. And I had to shake. I mean, this one was a little more PTSD, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm sure there's an element where, athletics of any sort, that chapter closes on all of us eventually.
Eventually.
It's probably better when you get to choose to turn the page.
Well said.
Rather than having it turn for you.
Yeah.
So I'm sure if you'd quit at that point, it would have felt like the page had been turned without your okay. And now you get to decide when that's going to be. And what will you do if you're not training 10 or 15 hours a week for triathlon races? What do you see as the next thing?
Swimming is my first love.
Yeah.
So that's always going to be in the mix, provided my shoulders have held up great. All my joints have, so that's good.
Yeah.
So swimming will always be in there. weight training, especially as I move into my 50s and 60s, just from a, muscle, not want to lose muscle. But man, I mean, if I can't do triathlon, I'm going to do something else. Find a really challenging hike or a really challenging run. Or
is it the races that you're going after, or is it the
it's a little bit of
stretching yourself?
It's more stretching myself.
Okay.
I do love to race. I love to race.
Yeah.
But triathlon, one of the things that I love and hate about the sport is there are a lot of factors out of your control. You can't control the weather. You can't control who else is there racing around you, the things that can happen. You can drop your water bottle. Your electronic shifting can stop working. There are just so many factors. And so you have to, I don't go into a race thinking that every race is going to go perfectly. I actually go in thinking, okay, what's going to happen today? What can I prevent?
Yeah.
But what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Do I have a plan B? Do I have a contingency? If I don't, what am I going to do?
Yeah, mindset is such a key to any sort of success.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's always stuff that happens. In sports and endurance sports, I think one thing I have figured out is you got to be willing to really fail. And fail's not a four-letter word. It's actually not, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right? But if you think it is, then it makes the experience awful, because if you're not happy with your race or you can't finish or something, you see that as fail or failure. And you respond to that as, well, I'm going to take my ball and go home. That's
So you were first child, right?
I am.
Would you say you fit the mold of the first child as very type A, maybe a little bit perfectionist, but always wanting to do things the right way?
For the most part. Okay. Sometimes I wonder if my sister and I my sister Mary both my sisters are exceptional, but Mary has a lot of first child ways about her as well. But
as a first child, it's one of the hardest lessons to accept is that failure is not a four-letter word, right?
I agree with that.
Failure should be a learning experience, and the more you do it, the better you get. But
yeah.
I mean, I know my experience, again, as a first child and what I've seen in other first children is somehow we just miss that.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah.
So it takes a little more suffering to get to that point of understanding. So
yeah,
you're saying that that wasn't as much ingrained in you, that accepting of failure has been a little more in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. The second race that I did in 2018 was the Raleigh Half Ironman. And it was a total catastrophe. Total. And my kids were watching, my wife was watching, I had, family was here to watch. It was the last time Raleigh did it. And my nutrition was terrible. I cramped so bad, I could barely walk. But I thought, I'm going to finish this race.
There's something wrong with that race, because I did it the first year they did it and had the same experience.
Oh, it's probably good they retired it, as much as I hate to see Raleigh lose an Ironman.
That you're cramping on the run?
I was cramping on the swim.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah. I was still such a rookie.
Was it nutrition? Okay.
100%. I mean, if I've learned anything doing triathlon, it is the fourth discipline of you got the three legs, and then you've got to have the nutrition down. Yeah. It's vital.
So you cramped the whole time. Did you finish? You finished.
I finished.
Daytona was the only one you had.
Yeah. I did my first half Ironman in April 2018 down in Galveston, Texas, and did really well. So I had confidence for my first one. And then I got up here and it was a disaster. It was a total disaster. So I learned from it, and then I did another one and placed in the top 5. And then I did another one and I got second overall.
Wow.
In 6 months' time. So there's I would say I was resilient, and I was humble enough to really learn and listen and ask questions. Right. And that was when I realized, okay, we go back to the insomnia and the ruptured brain artery and working through Anne's cancer and all these things. Those are some of those building blocks that were probably there that I didn't recognize, that enabled me to very quickly adapt and get better and excel.
So kids in general are sponges. Our kids are of the age where like they're really sponges in paying attention to what we do, more so than what we say even. So do your kids pick up on this? Do they pick up on the resilience and
They do.
pushing through suffering? And
I think they do. I especially with the injuries. I know that I worry sometimes because I know I'm abnormal in some respects with just my drive to push my body and endure pain. And Dad's down. I can hear Dad down in the basement biking on his bike for 2 hours.
Yeah.
You know, and they'll come down there sometimes if they need something. They see me just literally gasping for air. I think some of that they probably map onto is that's a little bit of my dad's weirdness, but the injuries and pushing back and my attitude in the midst of it, they've told me, Josh, which is neat.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's a legacy.
Well,
there's things we leave stuff behind whether we want to or not.
We do, which scares me a little bit. I hope they're taking away everything from Ann and not me. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Trying to bring us back and maybe put a bow on the conversation a little bit. What's the next thing? What's the next adventure? And it can be a race or, I mean, maybe a bigger goal that you have.
I do. I have two. They're related, both in triathlon. Doing my first full in November, which is about a 2.5 year deferred dream. So I'm hopeful that my goal is to finish. I think I'll probably do well if I have a smart race. I'd love to qualify for World Championships Kona. Yeah. This is not my only opportunity. I've got another race slated for May and another in July of next year, fulls. That will both. So that's a goal and dream. And so that's number one. I also recently had and this was really tremendous, is USA Triathlon, the governing body of all triathlon for the United States, asked me to be an official guide for visually impaired triathletes. So blind triathletes. And so I went to a camp recently at the Olympic Training Center for a week and worked with some of the best ones we've got. And
what was that like?
We could do a whole different podcast on that, to be honest with you. It was so rewarding. It was, I think the thing that I take away, what I love about working with blind people in particular, especially since I've gotten the opportunity to understand it and lived with them for a week, is they are very comfortable needing other people. And as a result, I found them all to be delightful. Now, I may have had a cross-section of blind athletes who are maybe a little more exceptional than the average everyday blind person, but they were, there would be points where I'd have two athletes on either shoulder walking with me towards the lake to do open water swimming, and then I'm tethered to them, and there's just this comfort with needing other people, but they still want to excel, and those are not mutually exclusive, right? So I want to be the best triathlete, but oh, by the way, I do need a guide, and they're comfortable asking for help. And I looked at all these and I thought, there's a well-beingness to those athletes that I felt and saw and experienced, and you can see all the spillover into life with that. The way that we do, we're rugged individualists as Americans, and more and more we're detached from people. It feels like, and the mental health of our country, the solidarity of our country. If we did a case study on that week there, you could learn every lesson you needed just by watching and experiencing that. So that was really great. It stretched me out of my comfort zone in ways that, not physically, emotionally, right? Riding a tandem bike down a mountain with another guy on the back who cannot see, who cannot drive, and we're going 45 miles an hour.
Holy moly.
Practiced over and over and over and over. And I was white knuckled. Yeah. Right. I really did feel like the first day of driving, or the first day in 9th grade, right, where you're just saying everything feels new and scary and I don't want to do it. And you keep doing it. Yeah. So I want to race with, and I am going to race with some of the blind triathletes. and they race all over the world. So we didn't get there was one athlete who asked me to go with him to Turkey if he got selected. Turkey. Yeah. That's not Turkey Neck, North Carolina. That is Turkey.
Which is a real place.
It is, I'm sure. I'm sure. But Josh, that's the other goal, is to go and do some races with them. And
you're mixing endurance and meaning into the effort.
How neat is that, right?
And it's not lost on me that the exceptional experience of that came because you had to be physically connected with another human being.
Had to. They're touching you constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a neat video that one of the guides who was there. She's a great little YouTuber, and she put out a fantastic video of the experience, and it gives you, it really does give you a neat. It's about a 4-minute video. It gives you a tremendous window into what it was like. Wow. Right? She took all sorts of neat videos in the water and the pool, and I had to run and bike and swim blind to experience it before the athletes got there.
Well, what's also not lost on me is that 20 years ago, you were there.
Correct. That's correct.
You got an ability to empathize with this in maybe a little bit of a way that the rest of us can't.
That's right. Yeah. Really... The period in there where I didn't think I was going to be able to see, and that this is what my life was going to be like, in the sense of loss and the sense of what is it, and adapting and things like that. Again, you don't realize those things have seeped into your fiber, your heart DNA.
Yeah.
But they have.
Yeah.
And I had a tremendous experience. And yes, I could relate just a little bit more. Just a little.
And they sought you, right? I mean,
they sought me.
So a little bit of serendipity, things coming together.
Yeah.
But you said yes. And bringing this really full circle, it goes right back to what you said your biggest lesson learned through the darkest hours is do the next thing.
Yeah.
So that presented itself. You said, yes, I'm going to do the next thing. Now you've opened a door to a whole new universe of possibility.
I have.
That's pretty incredible.
It's neat. I met some tremendous people. Big-hearted, talented, and it struck me also just how sweet it is to do life with people who you might not otherwise. And it's so good.
Yeah.
It's just,
yeah.
I took away far more, I'm sure, than the athletes, the visually impaired athletes themselves.
Are you going to go back and train again? Is that like going to be a routine?
So we had 3 coaches there. At the end of it, they told me that the plan is they want me to come back. They know I'm going to do races. So they want me to come back. The hope is to expand this.
Okay.
Right? USA Triathlon's got a very focused effort on wanting to grow this part of the sport. And so they need great guides. They need great athletes. So the invitation is sort of an open-ended one of, yes, please come back when we do this again next year.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
So I'll finish this by saying I was just trying to catch up with you online. I was stalking you on Instagram, which is essentially what that means.
Yeah.
Even though I've completely gotten rid of all social media. I mean, probably several years ago, but you had a quote you posted that folks who insist on backing into parking spaces believe in zombies.
Yep.
That made me laugh. That was like, that's a van quote. And you pulled in next to my truck out there that's backed in. So apparently I believe it.
I'm seeing some trepidation, coming from you.
I do it all the time. And I said, I've got to be ready for my quick getaway.
Right.
I don't know what from, but apparently it's zombies.
Well, it kind of plays to it. I think that's I haven't been able to figure out another. You probably have a very compelling reason that's other than just your fear of zombies, which I have verified now being with you. But
yeah, I'm going to have to think about why I do that. I really don't know. I do it with my truck. I did not do that when I drove smaller cars. So I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a weird.
I don't know.
And then what I've noticed is people that park next to me inevitably back in.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Now I have not.
So there's
I haven't noticed
contagion of zombie fear.
This plays into every movie I've seen, Josh. Every movie. Yeah.
So for anybody listening, how can they find you on Instagram or any other social?
Oh gosh, what's my Instagram handle? Yeah, so I'm on Facebook, private. Just you can friend me if you want. Okay. Instagram is public.
You're on Twitter?
I am on Twitter, although I just haven't. I think I have 5 followers, and I think I've posted one thing in my since I created the account.
You do quite a bit on Instagram, though, don't you?
I do enough. Yeah. It's funny. I am so not trying to be an influencer. Mm-hmm. Instagram for me, I use it for what it was intended, which is I post pictures of things that I think are either funny, beautiful, or special. Yeah. But I'm not trying to.
It's funny you say that because I wrote down what in just 5 minutes in scrolling through your pictures, what I thought were the top important things in your life. So kind of the first things, your kids,
yes,
triathlon, swimming, and humor.
Yes, you got it.
And then the fourth was any picture where you're able to take your shirt off. So
I don't think there's more than maybe one on those. And there's never been a shirtless selfie. Never.
Okay. All right. Well, that's
I mean, look, I've been living in a Speedo for 40 years. My modesty. I don't even. Sometimes my wife reminds me. She's like,
that's not normal, Van.
It's not normal. Yeah. It's not normal. But
you make people uncomfortable.
Yeah, you do. You do. You really are. And I'm like, I think you're right. Yeah. I think you're right.
Well, I think those first principles have been fairly consistent as long as I've known you.
Well, thanks. Yeah.
And it's neat to see that. And what's inspiring to me is that you're living that. And I'm interested to see what you do next.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, take it a year at a time, right? Yeah. Or maybe a day at a time, as we talked about, doing the next thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Van.
Thanks, man.
Man, I really enjoyed that. I hope you did as well. The next one will be coming at you in a couple weeks, so stay tuned. Until then, I hope you have your own great adventure.